Welcome back to Trail and Ultra Running Training. My name is Will Franz, a running coach and a strength coach, and the whole goal of this podcast is to help you train a little better so you can have more fun out on the trails doing the stuff that we like to do. Today, I'm going to talk about some nutrition things. I feel like I've been droning on about nutrition more than often lately, which I think some people appreciate and other people probably find very boring. I'm probably in the latter half, but we'll get to that in a minute. If you appreciate the information today about nutrition, then please subscribe. I think that's the biggest thing, or follow, or whatever relevant platform things that tell the robots you want them to show my stuff to you more, or just share it with somebody. That'd also be really cool. So today, I've been having a lot of talks with people about nutrition lately, and I want to be honest, I find nutrition kind of boring, which is funny because it's really the whole reason I got into this industry. I loved food. I wanted to help people eat better, wanted to help people learn to cook, and I spent like hundreds and whatever, maybe probably thousands of hours reading and listening and learning. After you work with a few hundred people, like normal humans, you learn that nutrition just really isn't all that complicated. And it can be really hard because, cake tastes better than broccoli, and the internet sure as hell likes to make it seem complicated, telling you that fiber is somehow bad for you, even though every single study in existence says otherwise. Yet it's really not. And I'm sure someone's going to call me out on that last one. Yes, there are issues with like IBS and IBD where like fiber seems to exacerbate it, but once you solve the problem, it's still healthy for you. Anyway, further, it just doesn't make the biggest difference when we look at really anything. If we eat reasonably, which is a vague term, exercise quite a bit, and live a stress-free, happy life, we're probably going to get the longevity and happiness and whatever health goals that most of us can hope to achieve. I think there's this big push to live to, pardon me, like 500 or some shit right now from like the longevity institutes of those like Aubrey de Grey, and I don't know. I don't see that being realistic. Maybe, but I think it's probably going to come from like gene editing and medicine more than it is going to be whether I choose to eat broccoli or not. So I think if we just eat reasonably, exercise quite a bit, live a stress-free, happy life, and then kind of like try to have some purpose, we'll probably be fine. When they look at the nutrition of centenarians, they actually see a wide range of things, from meat consumption to no meat consumption to seafood to whatever, and then the big lifestyle commonalities that everybody has are just completely ignored. There's a lot of consistent daily movement. There's a lot of stress reduction stuff. I think this is actually why we had the French paradox for so long in regards to wine. Like, why can you consume wine and see like improvements in health markers? It's because you share it with your family and it's nice. That's it. Wine's bad for you, but it's like nice to enjoy and it provides some stress reduction. As far as food, we often just make it hard because we're not willing to make compromises. We want to both eat nothing so that we lose weight really fast while also training to perform our best for our upcoming race, right? We want to lose body fat, but also eat pizza every day. But if we get over this like lack of compromise, we probably know more or less what to eat. I rarely see people struggle if they just try to pursue a like largely whole food diet that makes them feel good. And then for the athletes I coach, take that and then add a lot of carbs around training. It can happen where we see struggles on these things, but it's rare. Occasionally, you might have a thing like celiac disease or Hashimoto's or another like autoimmune thing that completely fucks the whole paradigm. However, if we're not in that subset, if we just try to eat like basic whole foods, you'll probably be okay. Most of the time that we struggle, it's just because we're not very consistent. If we try to eat 3 meals a day, have some protein and fiber at each meal, fuel your training appropriately with carbohydrates, and probably cook most of your own food because our food environment is a mess, then going to be fine. Oh yeah, and probably don't drink many of your calories outside of your training. So now, I should also, as athletes, realize that your body will probably change a bit throughout the year. And that's really normal. If we're in the winter and we're not training a lot, we're like going through Christmas things and enjoying and whatever, like you might put on 5 pounds of whatever. And who cares? Because you're probably going to lose it in the spring as soon as you crank your mileage back up. And that's okay. And it's actually really reasonable, much like your fitness is not going to be in peak shape all year. Your body will change a little bit throughout the year as well. It's absolutely okay. Now, the reason I'm started talking about this or got a bug up my ass is because I got tired of seeing diets that I know for a fact do a lot of harm posted as performance diets. And if you, as a public persona, Lane Norton's a good example, talk about how sugar is going to probably help you fuel your workouts better and how carbohydrates are a fuel and all of these things, then somehow we're going to end up with a ton of pushback. And I was probably in that other camp for a long time, so I feel ya, but I have thankfully moved forward. Now, carbohydrates do actually improve your performance. This is not a deniable fact unless you can't eat them for some, again, autoimmune reason. Your biggest limiter in almost any activity over 90 minutes is going to be fuel, temperature, like internal temperature, and hydration. And it's not going to be this big shift in fitness. Yes, it's going to need to have some bone strengthening for longer time in the legs. You'll need to have some muscular endurance. But for the most part, whatever we can push to about 90 minutes to 2 hours, in theory, I realize practice doesn't always follow theory for a wide range of reasons, but in theory, you should be able to more or less cardiovascularly hold and muscularly hold as long as we keep you fueled. Yes, eventually muscle breakdown will take that over, but if we can keep you fueled okay, you will be fine. The biggest limiter, even for professional marathoners in the marathon, is technically fuel. They're going to run out of carbohydrates before they run out of fitness. Now, if your fitness is higher, you can see a bigger drop-off and not notice it as much because you're still really fast. And this is what we see with a lot of people. If you had any one of the Olympic marathoners join, let's say the Salt Lake City Marathon, they're going to win, period. It's not a big marathon major. It's not going to whatever. And then they could probably win without fueling very much because their fitness is so high. However, that is still technically their limitation. Now, if we can run a half marathon in 90 minutes, the biggest limitation we're going to see, again, is going to be hydration, heat management, fueling, because we're looking to stay for all of these higher level stuff below lactate threshold. And if we're below lactate threshold, then yes, there's muscle damage happening, there's all these things, but if you're somewhere below your hour race pace, then as long as we manage our fuel, our internal temperature, our hydration, and these secondary things, we're going to be fine. So we have to find what works for you, but that does not necessarily mean that your personal fueling strategy is actually a performance strategy. It probably means that you might have found a strategy earlier in life that helped you stay consistent. You worked really hard. You train well in spite of a less than ideal nutrition protocol. I know a few professional athletes who arguably have a less than ideal nutrition protocol, but they perform well in spite of that, much less because of it, And now, if we're at this point where you're looking to increase your performance and you refuse to change, then you're probably going to see some limitations. And as I said, I get it. I sent out an email yesterday where I opened up a little bit about my own food struggles because honestly, it's been a thing, and it's a thing for most of my life. I have definitely some fears about eating more food, and I know it hurts my progress. I got made fun of in middle school for being fat, and I've gone up and down with my body fat a few times in my life, and one of the only things that I found in my early 20s that helped me was this 1 meal a day thing and a lot of exercise, which definitely helped on that front. But I also tried to push that through a performance period of my life, and it leads to nothing but injuries and problems and pains and etc. right? So if we see people on maybe a podium or with a big platform talking about this, then it's very possible that they may also have some kind of background, much like I did. Now, my turnaround has definitely been more recent, and I'm trying to eat a lot more consistently throughout the day and fuel my training and make sure we're getting at least those like 60 grams of carbs on runs and that kind of stuff. But if someone has found a strategy with which they want to live their by which they want to live their life, I think that's great. I really do. The problem I have is pushing this from the top of a podium or with a large internet following in a sport that is notoriously filled with eating disorders, in athletes that are famously focused on their weight, where we have a history, a very recent history of like public weigh-ins at the Nike project and like high schoolers stepping on the scale in front and like having to run extra or having to make weight or not making the team. When we have this very recent culture, probably still existent in some places, although there does seem to be a big shift in the past couple of years, which is probably why we're seeing records shattered. But there does seem to be a big shift in the last couple of years. But when we have this kind of culture, and then we stand up and push an eating pattern, any eating pattern, that increases the risk for problems like RED-S, relative energy deficiency in sport, or stress fractures, or any other injuries, some of which I've experienced, thankfully not those two. But it's not a performance diet. And it's not a performance diet because at the very least you can't recover well enough because you're not eating enough food. And carbohydrates help you run faster. So just because it works for you doesn't mean something else wouldn't work better. Because no professional athlete in any of the like big sports does this shit. They don't do the intermittent fasting. They don't do the keto. They don't do whatever. Like, the only reason someone doing some form of carb restriction is ever podiumed is that, like, the general public, like, there's no money in the sport, I guess. And I'm only attracted to sports that, like, have very little money in them. I played Ultimate Frisbee at a decently high level for a while, abroad, no less. There are still 0 professional Ultimate Frisbee players. There are professional leagues, but, like, all of them have jobs, at least as a year ago. I'm friends with somebody who like runs Ultiworld, which is like the ultimate Frisbee ESPN. And I know that they don't make any money doing that. And interestingly, there is a career in disc golf, but that's neither here nor there. So as a result, I've like seen this cognitive dissonance since I was in college. Like people would talk about some of the best Frisbee players in the world and theorize how they would do on a basketball court or on soccer or whatever. And they get their asses handed to them is the actual answer, because like most of these Frisbee players that we were talking about were basketball players who didn't make the college team or volleyball players who didn't make the college team. And it'd say dumb things like, I don't think so-and-so professional basketball player would be all that good at Frisbee. And yes, they definitely would be, because we had some people on the team who weren't very good throwers. And they scored so many goals because they were just fast and could jump. In worst case, they'd be like a professional basketball player would be that guy, but like 1,000 times better. I think we often forget how good professional athletes really are. Like very good high school kids, not even future professionals, regularly run their like 3-mile cross country in under 15. And I just like I don't think people realize the separation between professional athletes and the rest of us. Like we know, but until you see it, it's tough to actually recognize it. You don't see a 7-foot-tall person very often. And then if you're on a basketball court, you're going to see an insane amount of them. Like, I think Steph Curry's like 6'5" or something, and they make him look short. These people are just not the same. And it's the same, like, these Olympic marathoners. Like, did anybody even see the entire Olympic field run up a 10.5% grade at like a 5-minute mile? Like, they barely broke stride. They went into it, their usual like 4:30 pace, which they hold for a marathon, and then barely broke stride, cranking up a 10% grade. It was wild. And if you multiply that course by like 4 times, you have a course that's quite a bit harder than Rocky Raccoon, a notoriously flat course in the trail and ultra world. And obviously, barring the torrential rain that turned the entire course into a lake last year, shout out to Brian Gilbert, go check out his episode. But Ian Sharman, a legend in our sport, has like the Rocky course, I think 12:45, and there's no way that any of those Olympians wouldn't have smashed that record with a little practice. And all of them eat an insane amount of carbohydrates. All of them eat a shitload of food. We're talking about just a performance level that's ridiculous. And the fact is, like, it probably applies to most people across the board. But in certain sports, you might be good enough to where you want to be. And if you were happy enough with the life you're living and the performance you're getting, then that's great. But if you're looking to improve your performance, or you're wondering why you're constantly plagued by some like constant niggly injuries, and you're not eating consistently, and we're not fueling our runs, and we're not pushing our recovery, and we're not sleeping well enough, then maybe this is a factor. And maybe we stop the shit I did for a decade and like stop with the intermittent fasting stuff. Because again, like 0 actual highly paid world-class athletes use this as the low carb keto bullshit as a fasting strategy. They might do it in the off season to restore some gut health. It has health benefits to some people, but this is why we should periodize our year. This is why racing every weekend is not a health strategy. High-level sports are not necessarily a healthy thing to do. It's probably healthier than sitting on the couch and doing nothing. Definitely healthier than that. But it's not an optimum health strategy. So we should stop trying to combine these like health diets of carb and calorie restriction, because they are. We see that there are longevity benefits to permanent calorie restriction. I'd rather eat some fucking pizza, but that's fine. If you want to like put an extra 2 years on the end of your life and not eat pizza, then that's also cool. However, let's try to stop combining these health diets in a performance space, because that's also not going to be healthy. We're going to undereat, we're going to underfuel, we're going to get hurt, we're going to get injured, and we're going to see everything fall off. Then we're going to wonder what the fuck happened because we were doing this healthy thing. So fueling is the way. Carbs are rocket fuel. If you want to perform well, you have to recover, which means we need to eat enough. So if you think you might not be eating enough, you don't have to track your food, you don't have to weigh more. Try eating more and see what happens. You might feel like bloated and full and tired. Great. Pull it back. Or you might realize that you haven't been eating enough, which is what I've been doing unintentionally. I've actually been making a large effort this year. It's hard when you train many, many hours a week and work a bunch, and it's like a third job is eating. But that's the whole thing. If you care about your performance, we will figure it out. So good luck. I hope this made sense. Again, nutrition doesn't have to be this complicated. Eat more. See what happens. And thanks for sticking out. I'll be back soon with another one. Go have some fun on the trails. Thank you again for listening to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Podcast. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Just a reminder, nothing you hear on this podcast is medical advice, and you should always speak with a medical professional before making changes to your training or your nutrition. If you enjoyed the podcast or found it helpful, please leave a rating or review. It tells the algorithm robots that people like it, and that means more people will hear it. Or even better, just share it with someone who you think would benefit. If you prefer a video version, head to the Trail and Ultra Running Training Group on Facebook, or check out the Mountain Goat Endurance Coaching YouTube channel. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great next run.